Hey everybody, I wanted to see what it was like for my camera doing high-speed video. I've got an R6 Mark II, and I just wanted to see what it was like for the high-speed 180 FPS versus 30 FPS. So I stepped outside since it was snowing, grabbed a little bit of footage, and then came in and decided, what the heck, let's just put a little project together and pop it up on YouTube. Well, during the creation of this, a couple of things came to mind as I was putting it together, and it dawned on me that some of this stuff might actually be beneficial to other people. So I figured, what the heck, I'll go ahead and put this together, do a little explanation video of what I did, and so on and so forth, just in case it does help somebody else. I'm just going to jump through a couple parts of it real quick just to show what I'm talking about. So obviously this first frame is just the primary video with a little text overlay with a gradient in the text and a little stroke around the text. There's a transition through here. Then over on the second side of the video, another text on top of it, and I've got some particles coming off of the text that are being colored by the text that are sort of snowflake shaped, kind of blown out in the background. And I was going for a little bit of a snowflake slash bokeh type of effect. Anyway, had that going on in the second part of the video, and then on top of that, there's an audio transition that I arranged with different stages of reverb and such as it mixes across, because there's two different songs and a wind chime effect that I put in here. First off, let's go ahead and talk about the project settings. I knew that I wanted to do it as a YouTube short, so I knew it was going to be the vertical framing. So to set that up, you just pop over here to your project settings under file, come up here, you want to set your resolution whatever you want it to be. Up here it'll probably start out 1920 by 1080 unless you have your defaults changed to something else. They have this little checkbox. You can just pop this in instead of having to go up. If you're using an older version, you will have to select custom and then type your numbers in, but as of the more recent versions, you can just click use vertical resolution and it'll switch it for you automatically. Love it. I knew I wanted the target playback to be in 30 frames per second since my original clip was 180. So I went ahead and set the frame rate to 30 frames per second and then clicked save. I just canceled because it's already set up. That's what you need to do for priming your project, is kind of do a little bit of pre-planning, figuring out what the speed of your clips are and so on and so forth. So my base clip that this was all set on was this one right here, which is done in 180 frames per second, and as you can see, it's turned sideways. Oh, how's that supposed to work? This is actually super easy to deal with, so that's not that big of a deal. So let's go ahead and just scrunch this up, and we'll just sort of rebuild this over here. So I drag this over onto my timeline. Go ahead and get rid of that second viewer here. Then to deal with this, I just popped this up here, kind of turn it around, give it a quick rotation. If you're a real stickler for your alignment and you want it to be perfect, then just go over here to your rotation angle and just type in 90 or whatever is required to get it lined up correctly. And then suddenly you'll be perfectly aligned. With getting the edges to fill, I have it set to where, since it's drug in over in the project settings, if you go to your image scaling, it just fills the frame with the video. Since my video was a mismatch for this, obviously it's way too small to fill this. Fortunately, it is the correct aspect ratio to be a perfect fit for this. So if I just drag this out, I just look at these edges really closely as I'm dragging it out, and of course you could just go a little bit past and just, you know, be done with it. If you're a real stickler for getting it, that's how you would line it up perfectly. Anyway, so yeah, we'll pop that back out to fit the screen. Turn this off because I don't need to deal with the sizing anymore. And then what I did was go through, just kind of scrubbed through the video to find a decent area that it showed the background. And here's a dark background, which is why I selected this area of the clip. So I just drug this up here to approximately right in here, I think. And then just kind of looked at the rest of the video, just decided, okay, that's good enough. So now I have my 180 FPS section of video that I want to show. And we'll just go ahead and scooch this down for, and we'll just call that good. Whatever. It's not terribly important. Okay, so how do we get the 30 FPS version of this? Well, we know this is 180. 30 FPS is going to be 1/6 of that. So we need to speed this up by 6 times, or 600%. Well, before we do that, we already have a clip that's in the perfect frame rate, 180 for the high speed. So let's Alt and drag to make a duplicate of this. And then we have our duplicate right here. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could do the resizing. You could go in here, right clicking on this, go into retime controls, and then you can drag it to the sizing you want if you know exactly how long it's supposed to be. I don't know in this. I just arbitrarily clipped out the section that I want. You can go down in here and click change speed, and you can see if there is a match for the speed that you want. For this, there isn't, because we want to change this to 600%. Well, there's no 600, so I don't have that option easily selected. You could go into your retime curve and then switch this over to speed instead of frame. I really wish there was a way to switch that. I don't know of one at the moment. And then you can try and drag it to the perfect speed if you preferred to do it that way. There's a much easier way to do this, though. Instead of doing all of this stuff, what you can do is pop over here, and I always choose optical flow and speed warp. If perfection isn't the primary thing that you're after, then these are not necessarily that big of a deal. If you don't have a massive amount of processing power and you're doing a longer clip, then you probably don't want to use these settings. They will grind on your system quite a bit. So anyway, but for this, I wanted as accurate of a representation as I could get. So optical flow and speed warp is what I went with. Then for the easy way about it, you go up to speed change, and over here where it says speed percent, we know that we're going from 180 down to 30. So that is a 6 times reduction. So we want this clip to be 600% faster. So we go up here, enter 600, boom, automatically resized for us. Easy peasy. Slam those together, and boom, we're done. So now we've got our clips here all set and timed out wonderfully, so on and so forth. Well, now I want to make a little bit of a distinction between these two. I want to label it similar to the way I did in this original clip, 30 FPS. I want something above here, and then I want something different above this one, just to kind of give a little bit of a distinction between the two. Nothing major. Well, depending upon what you want to do, there's a couple of immediate options. You can do a text, basic text, or text plus. So the deal is why I didn't use a basic text. Anytime that I want to put in text with some emojis, I always pick the basic text, because you can type in whatever, and then if you hit the Windows key and the period, then it gives you access to your emojis, and you can go in and enter whatever kind of emojis, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. This is something that you cannot do with the Text Plus. But as you notice over here, if I go to this, my color options are limited to a single color. I don't know of a way that I can do a gradient. There might possibly be one, but I don't know of one. So anytime I want to do anything with a gradient, I automatically can't use a basic text node. And I knew that I wanted to do some sort of a gradient, and I didn't really care about adding emojis, so that made this decision really simple. So next thing, I grab my text node out here, drag it out to the size of my clip, have it all sized up. And let's see, I think I typed in 30 frames / second. Okay, so got that done. Pick yourself whatever font you want. I'm just going to leave this as the default. Then I go up here to the color, and oh wait, it's only a single color. Well, okay, I want to do a gradient. Well, how the heck do I do that? If you go over to the shading tab for your Text Plus node, and you come down here under properties, you'll notice, and this is if you have the select element number 1, the white solid fill enabled, this is where you'll get access to this section. If you happen to have one of these others selected, it's for something completely different. So you want to make sure that your number 1 element is selected. Then you come down here, and then you have your type, solid, image, or gradient. For this, we wanted to do a gradient, and obviously I'm looking for sort of a Christmassy type of a color scheme. So you can just go with a quick red, and then I select my other node point, and then I bring that way back down, and I think I went for a little bit darker green, but we're just going to keep this simple. And I don't want it to fade just straight from the red to the green. I want to have a little bit of a white band in the middle of it. So I go ahead, and you could either go ahead and click this color and change it here, which is really simple to do. Boom, boom, we have our white color. Alternately, if you didn't want to do it that way, you could go over and drag the sliders. For the white color, it's just easier if you do it that way, because then you don't have to deal with all 3 of the sliders and so on and so forth. Anyway, so there we have our basic gradient, 3 color, all wonderful and Christmassy looking. Now, how did I get the stroke that was around the letters? Well, that's really simple. If I go back over here under the shading tab again, my Text Plus, the second element is a red outline. And boom, well, basically you're done right there. And you just use these for doing any particular adjustments that you want to do to it. And I suggest, kind of play around with this kind of stuff. You'll learn some different ideas, positions, and rotations, and how you can deal with this kind of stuff. Just kind of mess around with it, see what it's capable of. For this, we're just going to leave it as is real quick and move on to the next part. So I've got my text. It's not in the position where I want it, so obviously that means I've got to move it. Oh yeah, I wanted to leave it at the center, and we just wanted to go up with it. So We'll drag our Y position up for the layout. Let's bring it up to about here. That seems reasonable. And then we'll call that good. Okay, well, that gets us one of these done. So I have the basic set. Now I want to copy it over to this side, but I don't want to have to redo everything. So I just do the same thing I did earlier to copy the clip. I Alt, drag, and then it makes a copy of it. Stretch it out to fill the entire length to cover this timeline. Then I pop up here after I make sure and select the new text plus clip. Change my text to make it suitable. And let's say I wanted to dispense with this red outline, which there's a good reason for it. Anyway, I'll explain it once we're over doing the particle stuff. So this is taken care of now. All right, what's left with this? Now, what we have left to do is go in and add the particles to this. Then we have to go and do the transition across this. So how do we do the particles? Well, you can't convert this into a fusion clip. You could create a fusion clip and then go and replicate all of this stuff in the Fusion tab. That would be reasonably easy to do. But it's a whole bunch of unnecessary work. All you actually need to do is make sure your clip is selected, then go over here up at the top. You'll see this little magic wand with the sparkles. If you click this, then it will go and take you over to the Fusion tab. Okay, so now we're in the Fusion tab. Drag this down, give ourselves just a little bit of space. Then we're going to get this template moved way on over here, and we're going to add a background node. So easiest way, my personal preference, hold down Shift, hit your space bar, type in the letter B. It's going to pop up, automatically select background, and then you can hit enter. Now, if you have a bunch of other stuff already installed, third-party plugins like stuff from Reactor and such, you might possibly have something else selected that pops up before background. But if you don't, then background's always going to be the first thing that pops up when you type in the letter B. So anyway, boom, we've got our background set. We're going to drag this over and connect it here to the media out. Then, because we want this background to be translucent, we're going to pop over here. It automatically defaults to black. What you need to do is you need to turn the alpha layer all the way down. So we've got our checkerboard pattern, and we know that we have an alpha channel. Then we're going to grab the output for the template. We're going to drag it to the output of the background and drop it so that it will automatically add a merge node in line with the media out. So now our lettering is on top. Now, from here, I'm going to drag the template, which is where our text is living right now, a little bit back. From this point, we need to go and add in the P emitter and a P render immediately to get our particle system basics set up. You can hit the Shift space bar and type P, E, and it's most likely going to pop up to your P emitter unless you have other stuff installed that could possibly pop up first. And if you don't, anyway, type in PE, it's going to pop up P emitter, hit enter. Now you've got your P emitter. Now you can do the same thing again for P render. Simple enough. Boom, you got your P render automatically connected if you still have your P emitter. Alternately, you could go up here to the toolbar and just click on the P emitter and then move over here and click on the P render. Do the exact same thing, whichever way you prefer. Once you've got these on the board, then you're going to grab the output of the P render and you're going to drop it down in the background, and it's going to create a merge. And if you look at your P render, you will notice that it automatically shifted over to 2D. That's not a problem because that's our intended output anyway. We're not going to be rendering this out to a 3D space, so easy peasy. So now we've got to figure out how to get the text from this, which is the text here, the location, the coloring, so on and so forth, into the P emitter so it knows where to put all these particles. Now, if you look here, you can see all these particles sitting right here. Well, this is not where we want them. We want them to come from these letters up here. So how do we deal with that? Well, that's actually pretty simple. If you pop over here to the P emitter, we have all these little tabs up here where the magic is going to happen. So first thing, let's go over to style. If we go down through here, you can see we've got point, bitmap, blob, brush, line, ingon, and point cluster. Well, we are going to be using this to determine what these little points are going to look like, because obviously these are going to be way too small. But we still need to figure out where we're going to put these. So we'll leave this for the time being. We'll come right back here in a moment. Let's go over to region, because this determines where they come from. Right now they're coming from a sphere, or since it's being rendered in 2D, it's going to be a circle. So let's select this, and we want to change it to bitmap. Now, when we switch it to bitmap, you want to pay attention right here, because an input is going to appear. This right here is our image input. This is what it's going to be looking for the image that it's going to use to locate the particles. And you'll notice the particle cluster that was right here is gone. Now, the reason is it has no image input. So it has no location, no coloration, no nothing. So there's no place to put particles. So we'll bring the output of our template down here to the image input. And now, oh wait, we still don't have any particles. What's going on? Aren't there supposed to be particles? Well, yeah, they are. But if you think, we have not given this any motion, any direction, anything. So all the particles are directly behind these letters. So, and that's due to how we have these merging. If I were to hit Control T while this is selected, I can switch this to the foreground. And then I can, well, anyway, you could simply just do this, and I'll switch that back, and you can see the particles here. So anyway, they're spawning behind our text. What we want to do now, we jump back over here to our style tab where I was pointing out the different options earlier. Now we want to go and we want to pick something that is going to be a little bit larger. Well, pretty much all of these are going to be larger, but let's go over and we select oh, that's not what I was looking for. We select brush. And there are a bunch of custom images. If I can click on the right one. So we click on our brush, and you have all these pre-generated images that it will use as particles. Now, you can basically do the same type of thing if you go in and use bitmap, but then you have to supply it with a bitmap to use. I already know for this particular purpose we want these snowflakes, and snowflake image is one of the options for the brush. So go down here, pick this, and then we'll pop up, and I'm going to zoom in on this, and you can see, you can barely make out behind these letters where the snowflakes are. If I were to disconnect this again, you can see the snowflakes are now clustered behind where the letters are. But still though, this isn't doing us any good because it's basically obscured behind the letters and they're not doing anything. They're just sitting there doing nothing. So how do we deal with that? Well, easy. We go over here to the main control and we go down to the velocity and we give it just a wee bit of velocity. You don't want to turn this up too much because, yeah, well, I guess if you wanted a blizzard, then you could give yourself a blizzard, whatever. But you want to turn that up to something that you find sufficient. All right, well, let's go back here and see what we're looking at. So now we have a little bit of particle motion going sideways. Well, this is terribly boring because it's not really doing anything. Well, we could mess around with the velocity variance and the angle variance and so on and so forth, position variance, blah, blah, blah. But there's an easier way to deal with this. So make sure the P emitter is selected. Hit Shift Spacebar. Type in P turbulence. And suddenly we have drifty snowflakes. Ooh, look at the wind blow. And that's kind of what you want. And of course, you can go into your P turbulence and adjust the strength how you want it. You know, you could go in and turn up the velocity a bit for your snowflakes. You know, just play around with it. Get it to something that you like the way it looks, so on and so forth. Okay, so from here, we have one further problem. If we zoom way in, you can kind of just vaguely make out that it might possibly look like a snowflake, but it's so small, you can't really make out anything. Well, if we go back over to the style again, we can pop down here to the size controls, and then we can crank up the size a bit. And here you can start to see, oh yeah, these actually are snowflake. Well, now they're way too bright. Not a problem. If you go up here to the gain, you can turn the gain down, and suddenly it looks like out of focus snowflakes in the background. You can just kind of adjust it to your preference, however you want it. You want them just vaguely coming in, then there you go. Turn that way down. But we still have another problem. These are all white or gray at this point since they're kind of faded out. But they don't pick up any of the red or the green. And we want it to do that for, I don't know, whatever reason. Just make up something and there you go. But let's say we wanted to pick up the color from this. Well, that's really easy to do. Go over to your in the P emitter and the controls, down to color. Instead of use style color, we go down, use color from region. Now what that tells us, whatever you have set over here, that's where it's going to grab the color from. The region is set to bitmap, which is the image input that's coming in here. So it is going to grab the color from your text. And then if we do a little playback here, and we suddenly have these nice colored snowflakes just kind of drifting along. And in my opinion, that looks like there's going to be too many. So let's just turn the number down a bit. There we go. Now we have these lovely little snowflakes sort of drifting in and fading out. All right, problem solved. And we didn't have to redo anything with our text. Didn't have to reset up the gradient or anything. There's one other thing that I did. If you notice, as I scrub this across, pay attention to this gradient. It rotates. All right, same thing here. Well, it's fixed in this one. But with this, we don't have that rotation. Now, how do we do the rotation? That's super simple. Pop over here, go to your shading. So with your text plus selected, pop over to shading. Make sure your selected element up here is the number 1 because that's where you do the color overlay for your text. From the mapping angle, this is where you're going to do your automation to rotate this gradient around. You'll want to pick where your starting angle is that you want to start from at the beginning of it, set that, and then jump to the end of your clip or wherever in the middle that you want to change it, and then wherever else you want to change it again, however you want to do it. I was in a hurry when I put it together, so I just had it set to 0, set my first point, went to the end, popped over here, typed in 359 because I wanted it to make a full circuit. Done. Now if I play this through, you can see this gradient rotates as it goes through. Just does a full circle. Now, with this, we have our snowflakes going out, so on and so forth. You could do the exact same thing with this if you wanted to. Pop over here to shading. Oh, whoops. So shading, and select your first element, then go down to your mapping angle and click that, and then jump to the end and 359, and then suddenly you have this whole thing. Whoops, let me give this a second to render a moment, or I can jump over in the Fusion tab and then it will render the whole template here, and then I can kind of move this along and see exactly how this gradient, like I said before, is rotating as we go through here. And the snowflakes will be picking that color up off of here. I think in the original project I didn't bother to rotate the second one, so we'll jump back over here and just cut that automation out. So now there's no automation for the gradient rotation. It's just the snowflakes being emitted, and that's all there is to it. All right, so now we have this transition. If you do very much in here, you're going to know that if you go and try and do a video transition between these, that's not going to work very well. You've got these two different clips that don't want to play well together. So you could do your blur transition between the text clips with no problem, but down here you can't do it. You can't even do a transition at the beginning of the second clip. So how do you get it to do that? Well, there's a really simple workaround, and this won't work great with everything, but for this particular blur dissolve, it works perfectly fine. So this is how I ended up doing it. You select all of your clips, new compound clip, and make sure your cursor is in the correct position where you want to do your cut. Click create, then you hit B, or select your blade tool, whichever one works for you. Make sure your magnet is on. You'll go right over where your cursor's at, click, and it'll split these two clips in the middle, and then you'll hit A to switch back to your cursor. Then go over, grab your transition, and you'll suddenly magically be able to place it wherever you want to. So now we can put it right across there, and it'll just play right on across that previously impossible to do area, and we've got our dissolve. So easy peasy. Now, while we're doing this, I want to go over here and talk about this audio transition that I've got. So we're going to jump over to the Fairlight page. Now you'll notice this huge transition I have sitting right here. So what I've got is one audio clip, a sound effect of wind chimes, and then a second audio clip. Two different pieces of music. And you'll notice this says wet dry. What's going on with this? Okay, so if I jump over here, open up my effect that I've got, which is a stereo reverb from Waves, And yeah, Waves plugins work with DaVinci Resolve, so awesome. What I wanted is I wanted this audio to kind of live a little bit longer in the mix than it normally would have. Because if I go over here and play this, you can tell it's a pretty dry mix. It's not completely dry, but it doesn't have a long tail reverb, and I'm fading it out anyway. So once that gets faded out, any reverb that already exists in here is going to be killed off with it. So it's just going to come to a hard end. Well, I didn't want it to do that. With this reverb, what I did is I automated, and if you see right here, this wet dry, what the wet dry mix is, when you have a signal that is completely dry, which is what this is right now, with this all the way down here, the signal is completely unaffected. There's no reverb mixed in with it whatsoever. As I transition across through here, it turns the wet dry mix up to 100%. So by the time it's faded out, it's 100% reverb and nothing of the original, which is not that big of a deal anyway, because there's no original being played any further beyond this point. But what this does is it makes this live a lot longer. So if we solo this track out, this is what it sounds like. And you notice how that carried out quite a bit longer after this ended. Now, we also have this anomalous little chopped piece here that is similar to what this is right here. Well, these are actually the exact same clip. Now, what I did, I wanted to add a little bit extra life to the beginning of this when this fades in, but I didn't want it to be on this entire track. I just wanted it to be on this beginning hit with the music. So I clipped this, drug it up here, just made a copy of it, literally alt drug it, and then I did a quick fade out from the beginning of this little piece, popped it up here, and as you can see, it's still, the wet dry mix is still at 100. So when this hits, it carries out a little bit longer than what it would have down here by a long shot. So it just kind of livens up this transition a little bit more, and it's a little ephemeral and so on and so forth. I just thought it added a nice little additional touch to it. So here, I wanted these to really ring out big time as it came across this. So for what I did here, I have a different reverb that I crank the time of it way up to 20 seconds. It's a very, very long tail reverb. Not something you would normally use for anything. And I added in a LA2A compression because I very frequently like the way the LA2A sounds. So I put it on quite a bit of stuff, and oftentimes I will actually use this as my volume control just because I like the resultant audio that comes out of it. And if we solo this out, you can hear what this super long tail reverb does to these wind chimes. And notice, even after this is over, it's still trailing. And you can see it on the meter. It just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. Like I said, 20-second long reverb, very, very long. So it will keep these chimes kind of lingering in the background, fading out very slowly and carefully. Just adds a little bit of extra ambience. And then, of course, down here, it's just the dry original track. Don't have anything on this whatsoever. It's exactly how it came. So if I mix those three, we have this nice little transition. And that is how I did this little audio transition. Really super simple to do. And technically you wouldn't even need any of the Waves plugins. You could use the built-in reverb and kind of mimic, you know, whatever kind of reverb you wanted to do. But real quick, while I'm thinking about it, to get access to this automation, you click here, go down to plugins, and you'll see Reverb Stereo, and then this huge list of stuff. You have to know what you're looking for, and I was looking for the wet dry mix, which was right here. So when I clicked the wet dry mix, it selected that, and that is what is displayed here. If I go here and I select plugins, you can see I could do automation for the LA2A that's on here, or I could do automation for the reverb that's on here. If I go to the wet dry mix, well, look at what we have here. It's dry till the very start of this, and then it fades in fairly quickly to the maximum where it's nothing except reverb. So that's how I did the automation on these. Really, really simple to do. Anyway, nothing else was done to this. I didn't do any loudness altering. These are already pre-mastered audio tracks, so nothing was really necessary. I did do a little bit of a volume change on this, but just really minor stuff just to get it to sit in the mix. But I didn't need to do any volume alterations for this or nothing. Just left it as it was. Nice smooth transition, easy listening, sort of lingering in the background type of a vibe. So that worked really well. And that's how I put this little clip together. You know, just basic stuff. Do that little fade. Just play this across. Oh, as it turns out, I did automate that. Anyway, all I did was automate it at the beginning. Once it reached here, the automation was terminated, and I just left it as it was. So, anyway, that's all that there is to this. Hopefully, some of those pieces that we went over you'll find useful. The most notable that I have not seen anybody really talk about were how to access Fusion directly from one of the Text Plus clips here. It'll save you from having to redo stuff in Fusion. If you've got your text all set up and you just want to copy it, but you want to add in some particle effects or whatever, you can just go over and let me just select it real quick. Titles, Text Plus, using the little magic wand with the sparkles. You can just pop over into Fusion real quick, do your additions that you want to your already existing text, and boom, you're done. And then, of course, if you want to do a transition across clips that will not allow you to do so, select everything, turn it into a compound clip. Suddenly you can put your transition across the clips. And as you can see, it works perfectly fine. And obviously, it won't necessarily work across every single clip that you try this with. And some transitions are possibly going to look really wonky if you try this, but in general, it'll work out all right. And so, yeah, hopefully that helps.